All right, back at you, Hector.
Yeah, I think to wrap all this up, everyone has really provided amazing insights, and I think like the question that I'm going to ask next, I think all three of you have answered it, throughout the last hour. But there's young designers, there's current students, there's recently graduated educators watching this, lens session. What is something that they can do, whether they're a minority or they're an ally? What is something that they can do, something concrete, something practical? Because if we leave this conversation and they're inspired and they're motivated, but then they go back to their day to day, and if we don't do something about what we're talking about, then we're back to square one. What is something you suggest that people should be doing to take action on what we're talking about?
I think one thing people can do is definitely just create these spaces for the minorities and underrepresented people to have like a voice and to really like connect. I know for me, diversity and inclusion, I feel like white people aren't going to make the space that I want for me. I feel like I am. Even like people of color aren't gonna make the space for me. I'm Black. Don't lump me in as people of color. I'm Black with a capital B. So I feel like creating those spaces is really important as designers. I know me and some of my colleagues from Georgia Tech, we created something called the Hue Collective, where every year we have what we call an unconference, the Hue Design Summit, and we have people that UI, industrial design, visual design, they all come and we stay in the exact same place. And we have speakers and workshops, but they're not on a podium. They're sitting in the same chairs as us, right next to us. They're going to every single workshop. We're having like fireside chats, and then we're going to a room and eating together. Like we're creating that belonging aspect where everyone feels safe to talk about work, talk about what's on their mind, talk about politics, talk about anything. And I feel like that's the space that I've felt I have like fit in the most ever. Like I feel safe there when it comes to anything. If I want a mentor, I can find it there. If I want a friend, I can find it there. If I want a person that I can collaborate with me. And it's something that I created with my Black friends, and we created it for ourselves. So it's like, sometimes it's hard for me to tell an ally what to do, but something I've learned to do for myself is create the spaces I want to see, create the things that I want to see, and just add, an extension of that is create the world that I want to live in. And that's why I love design so much, and why design can really impact diversity, inclusion, belonging, all the words, because we have the ability to create and to make, and we know that we can do that.
I would say I want all my friends, allies, beautiful humans out there to become hyper aware. I've been at times criticized for being sensitive about, again, these little traumas that we have to bear and the questioning that we have to go over. I want you to work really hard to be hyper aware. It doesn't mean coddling. It doesn't mean doting on us like, little caretaken whatever creatures, but it's just be aware of those things and stamp it out amongst your peers. If someone's telling a joke or making a comment in the professional workspace, stamp it out. Say that's not funny. Take the Seth Rogen approach. You're not having it. You're done. Cultural memes that become ingrained in our society that then enable people to feel confident enough to kneel on a man's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds until he dies. Right? I don't believe that the officer woke up and he was just that way. I think there was a learning process. I have kids. I take it. I don't know if you have kids, Kevin, but Jasmine mentioned as well. And I can tell you what, when they're born, they come out just full of love, acceptance, and they don't. I see adults say, "Oh, I don't see color," and I call bullshit on that, because you do, because that's what you're teaching your kids, and those kids eventually become those officers. They become those people that are excluding minorities from groups. So my advice here is become hyper aware, become an advocate. It's not enough to tweet or post, thank you, high five, good job, but get out there, take action, and do it with force. Because, and I'm not advocating for violence or anything, I'm just saying do it with force, meaning swiftly, effectively, communicate your disdain for those things that you find morally objectionable.
Yeah, I love it. I mean, just to build, I would say to allies, humility. And I've seen a number of social conversations around, oh, I want to start coaching. I want to start coaching people to enter my world. And it's like, actually, what kind of got us here, I think we now are in a place where we need to question some of these systemic issues, these systemic threads that have been too long-standing across the course of time. Some of that needs to be dismantled and re-engineered for the better, to be more equitable, inclusive, and the like. So question everything and do it with humility. You can teach someone, you can coach someone, but make sure you take a humble position, because that person that you're approaching, who wants to get into your space, has a ton of insights that could prove valuable for yourself, your career, your business. So it's in everyone's best interest to be humble and serve ways that we can actually question some of the things that got us here. I mean, one of my favorite books recently was written by Kat Holmes. So the focus was more around like inclusive design and ableism and the issues there. But it's really about questioning the who, what, why, and when, and never taking anything for granted, never taking people for granted, and always asking who else.
I think piggybacking off of Kevin, now I do have some advice for our allies, since I just like pushed into the side earlier. I think it's having empathy. I mean, talking earlier, like the first question we had about like, I guess, diversity throughout our education and into the workplace, both Spencer and I are like, oh, we were the only ones, we didn't really question it. Has there ever been a white person, the only white person in the room for years, like wherever they are, like trying to just develop some empathy, because I mean, I'm on this teammate resource group called Parents for Professional Growth at Under Armour, and we were drafting like communication that was about stand for equality, because that's, one of Under Armour's values, and they want to use that to start standing for, Black Lives Matter and the people, our Black teammates and everything like that. And so when I was talking to my counterpart, she's white, and just we were going back and forth editing the communication that I made, I asked her, how often do you talk about race in your household? And she said, never. It never really comes up. And I was like, that's funny, because for me, I can talk about it every day, wherever it has to do with me and like a choice I want to make about wearing my hair, about what time I run and exercise throughout the day, or when I go get something, or making sure all my taillights are fixed on my car so I don't get pulled over, etc. Like, I talk about race every single day. Yeah. And for her to say never, I was like, I'm not even sure how to respond to that, but it's never been a problem for her. It's nothing she's had to think about. And it's nothing that she's decided to empathize with until George Floyd. And I feel like if we can have our allies try to empathize a bit more, talk about race more, and like Spencer said, take the Seth Rogen approach and just stamp out wherever you are, like talk to your families, because you're in those circles that I'm in. I can't talk to my white parents, grandparents, etc. But I want everyone to understand we're not so far removed from slavery, Jim Crow, lynching, that lynching era. That was like just terrorism against Black people. And like Ruby Bridges is 65. She was the first woman to integrate a school, I think, where she was living. And it's like, she's 65 years old. That's one person's life. So we should really just take stock of where we are culturally, like throughout that timeline, build some empathy, and start talking about it every day. Because if I have to talk about it every day, then maybe you should too. It's just a privilege that you are just now thinking about it as a problem and never had to talk about it before.
Where was I going to go with this again? It'll come back. Oh, it was a question in the panel here. Someone mentioned this idea of research, which I think I kind of touched on with my little anecdote about the crime situation and not really consulting someone. So I'd say the question was essentially, how do you approach things like a diverse research user group without seeming like you're after a quota? And I think just right now, just speak up enthusiastically, say, hey, here's a blind spot we might want to consider based on who we're selling to. That's one way to approach it. We want to make sure we have the data representing our real customer base. So using the right language can help I think those business partners that you're working with realize the value you're trying to create by speaking up. If you just say, hey, we need a Black person, they might not understand. But if you can approach it from a business value proposition and the benefit to the consumer ultimately, then you can kind of wedge your way and create some space for inclusion. And then there was a couple questions about what I said about the 10 principles, Dieter Rams. And I'm not saying it's an absolute thing that people follow, but a lot of the education we've had as designers has been heavily influenced by his input. And I'm thankful for what he did. But I would say now is the time. A lot of us watching, participating in this discussion, we're young. We're in the present, right? Empathy was mentioned, inclusion was mentioned. Good design is inclusive. Good design is empathetic, right? Those are adders or writers we can put onto these principles to say, here's how we're going to expand our vision for the future as a design community. All right, we want inclusion, we want empathy, we want people to feel like their culture or that good design has made room for the best or what you consider to be the best parts of your culture as far as design and art and representation goes. So empowering people to feel like they can contribute to what is good design, because a lot of times it feels like good design is approaching some singularity of, Eurocentric ideals, when really we kind of box out other, whether it be visual elements or color treatments. Jasmine mentioned, Black culture kind of leads the forefront of a lot of things in society as far as
behavior models too, I would add.
Yeah, behavior models as well. So it's like, I think it all comes down to just being more inclusive, empathetic, and making room for people to feel like they can participate in the conversation, not necessarily in a democratic way, meaning, design isn't a democracy per se, but we do want to create those spaces for conversation and for empathy.
Well, thank you all three again for your amazing energy to this conversation and for bringing insights and your own personal experiences and stories. We really enjoyed having you on Lens. Thank you for those who attended. We're going to, for those interested in continuing to have this conversation, we're going to switch over to our after Lens, which is kind of our kind of like after party from our Lens session, where we actually allow our attendees to come forward and share their stories and experiences as well. And then again, Spencer, Kevin, and Jasmine, thank you so much. This is just the beginning, I think, and I hope that, change starts with us, and it's our job to go and implement it and disrupt, what needs to be disrupted. So thank you so much for being a part of Lens. Again, this session will be recorded, or it has been recorded and will be available on YouTube later for those who missed it. So thanks, everyone. Have a good Sunday evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.